tell them is meaningful and is fulfilling. But when the workday starts at 9 AM, they face piles of assignment on their table. They face an angry boss. And they face unequivocal amounts of stress that puts them at displeasure. And the thing is, people will start to question, is it me that is undeserving of the job that people tell me is meaningful? Or what is it? Is it my fault and is it my problem? That's why inside of government we believe in two things, and this is our stance. One, we think that in our world, jobs that might or might not be meaningful will exist. The thing is, the motion doesn't require us to defend that no one should have a meaningful job, but rather we get the narrative that all jobs should be meaningful. Second, the alternative in our world, since it's a regret motion, is that jobs, and sometimes jobs that aren't necessarily meaningful, or you're unlucky enough to get a meaningful job, is a necessity, and it sometimes requires some temporary sacrifice and commitment for a sustainable life in the future. 2 points of argumentation I'll present here. First, why are jobs a necessity and sometimes require individuals to abandon meaningfulness? And second, why people only look up for jobs will be succumbent to more things like the job hopping culture, and that's problematic. First, why are jobs a necessity and sometimes require individuals to abandon meaningfulness? We think that currently the world today is quite harsh, and often there are many realities that disrupt the ability for someone to find meaning in the work they do. For example, you might be born in a suburban neighborhood or in certain poorer areas that are difficult for you to find a meaningful and relaxing and flexible job. Second, it might be things like the rise of automations that's currently taking up a lot of jobs, and the job market is becoming more and more limited. But it might also be millennials currently fighting for jobs in a saturated job market. It's just hard to find jobs. The important part to note in this characterization is that people, or most individuals out there, it's extremely hard for them to find jobs that are capable for themselves or tailor-made to their idea of it being meaningful. What is the harm to this? The harm is that the idea of defining meaningfulness is quite difficult when you take up a job. We think that often the criteria or the ability to quantify what meaningfulness looks like is quite difficult and it's quite hard to understand. So what do they do, and what do they compare what meaningfulness is? Two things. One, we think that often meaningfulness is derived from things such as pop culture, and there are often great exaggerations to what a 9-to-5 job should look like, and it's extremely unrealistic. For example, the glamorization of the life of a Wall Street financial banker, courtesy of the Wolf of Wall Street. But secondly, even if it's not pop culture, it can also be things, for example, comparing your current job to your peers, to your friends, and to your colleagues who might be more privileged than you, or who got a job from their father, and might be living might be having a feeling that their job is more fulfilling than yours. What's the important part to note here? The harm is that even if people currently have some meaning or find some meaning in their job, they are unable to find that meaning. The reason because of all these comparisons, all these characterizations, is that they constantly doubt whether or not their job is meaningful. That they constantly focus on the discontents of their job rather than some parts that might be happy. We also think what this narrative does is that it creates a extremely high benchmark for what it is to find happiness. And often, people who can't meet their benchmark hate themselves or feel as if it is their fault that is undeserving of their job. Take a seat. Second, we also think that for people, so not all people can find some meaning in jobs, for people that are currently within meaningless jobs, when you on our side, we'll tell them it is a necessity. We'll tell them you have to face it, and sometimes it is quite hard. But on your side, you give them unrealistic standards of what a job should be, and they're unable to feel happier in the future. The conclusion is quite clear, that a lot of people just aren't able to find happiness that they really want. But what you do is you degrade their ability to find happiness in their job, or at least find some content in their job where they constantly doubt themselves. Second point of argumentation, why people on the lookout for jobs currently face more harmful structures when this narrative exists. But before I move on, sure.
This is a regret. Therefore, we need to listen what is a comparative to this narrative.
Yeah, I gave you the comparative in the start of my debate. I'm not sure what they're hearing of, or maybe the mic is not clear, the volume is not clear. But we say our alternative is we'll tell them that a job is a necessity, and sometimes you have to sacrifice to go up to a job that is not necessarily meaningful. But it does not mean that all jobs are not meaningful. Some people are lucky to have a meaningful job, but for the majority that don't have a meaningful job, we'll tell them that sometimes they need a bit more commitment than others. Sometimes it is quite hard, but it's a necessity necessity for your life to move on. So, second point of argumentation. So I think that this motion shouldn't only be argued on people currently having jobs. What about people on the lookout for jobs or people applying for jobs in the future? We think that the harm with this narrative is that often people delay their career path. Often people become too picky in the pursuit for a more meaningful job. And because it's quite hard to define what a meaningful job is, or they are unsure what a meaningful job is, they constantly delay that job application. They say, probably I'll keep this in view, I'll apply for another job later, but by that time, that job would already be forfeited. The harm is that you create a job hopping culture. And the problem with job hopping culture is it obstructs career path and prospects of the future. I think this is quite a valid argument that a lot of CEOs currently use to characterize millennials or arguments against millennials. Because we live in a limited job market, a job that you would otherwise have gotten, a pretty decent job, you would probably forfeit that job in the pursuit for what is a meaningful job on their side. So what this narrative does, it makes a lot of people self-sabotage a correct but a pretty decent job that they have already. What is the comparative on the outside? Two things. The first thing is, we say that even if your job is currently quite hard right now, we think that it will be a temporary sacrifice for you or temporary stress that you have to fulfill for a sustainable life. But it's not in all to no avail. Sometimes we think that even if you go through difficult, you are in a difficult position, the job is stressful, it does not mean you staying on in that job might not give you more prospects, more job prospects in the future. Your pay might become better. You might get promoted, you might get more insurances, health insurances, and better welfare. The problem with the job hopping culture is that if you keep changing jobs from one job to another, it often looks quite bad in your CV. Are you a lazy worker? Are you a worker that's not committed? But on our side, we think that once you've been through that harsh journey and a difficult and journey that is quite difficult, you are able to find other forms of happiness in the future. When you have a better pay, you can access different forms of happiness. But all we think inside of government is that it doesn't have to come from your job.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your speech. And now
Testing. We live in a world in which our jobs define who we are. We cannot escape this particular system. We need jobs in order for us to have some form of purpose. What am I going to do today? What am the most things that take up a lot of our time in general? We think that it's fine, we think it's great that people should be finding meaning in the kind of things that take up the majority of our particular lives. We think that it's most possible and the most accessible form of happiness that exists as of now. We think that our burden in this debate is that this narrative helps people come to terms with the decisions that they've made, especially when it comes to entering jobs. We think that their burden is that they kind of need to prove why this particular job, abandoning the kind of attempt of finding something meaningful in their particular lives, is the kind of thing that would lead to a much more better chance of happiness as a whole. Because they notice that they always say that, abandon it because it's only a necessity, it is a form of necessity, but never provided to us the proper process when it comes to how does that one achieve happiness through this particular abandoning of the term of meaningfulness. But let's define what exactly is meaningfulness, right? Because on the side of opposition, we think that there's two aspects. It's possible one is what exactly is meaningful to you, and second also what is exactly meaningful to society. And we think that both of these narratives is very important. But before going on to key arguments, let's just deal with what Ben said. So first and foremost, he says that okay, you should just abandon the kind of, if your job you think it's not meaningfulness, then just abandon the attempt of finding meaning in it, right? But we think that this is oftentimes very terrible because we think that people should access various types of happiness and that they kind of never wanted, and the ability for people to attempt to find meaning and also define meaningfulness for themselves is a kind of accessible happiness that exists more under our side. And apparently he also says that meaningfulness is only mostly derived from pop culture, but never providing to us why exactly will everybody simply believe in this. Is that on our side, we believe that as long as people get to define meaningful, what meaningful is to themselves, then these particular harms wouldn't exist as a whole. Harmful structures for people apparently. He says that job hopping in general is something that is very bad. But we think that it's only harmful if it is not exactly harmful if everybody exactly does it. Why is this so? Because the second that if it's common, it means that most times corporations will be forced to give people meaningful jobs in order for them to not job hop anymore, in order for them to ensure that everybody in that particular system or corporation feels that they are of some form of a value. But going on to key arguments, right? Let's just deal with what exactly is this whole meaningful thing happens. Like, how does it exactly translate? When it comes to the first narrative, right? Meaningful to you exactly. It means what makes you happy. And the thing about life is that you only get one shot at this. You really don't know whether there's an afterlife after this. So you kind of want to make this one matter, right? This narrative helps people find a particular purpose. That if you don't want to feel like you're some kind of a zombie working an 8 to 5 job, if you think that's not great for you, then you would attempt to find what it is that makes you happy. If you want to be, let's say, a writer, for example, then that's fine. We encourage them to get out of their particular comfort zones in order for them to do the very best, which means that the ability for them, the incentives for them to also develop new skills, for example, the abilities for them to explore these kind of abilities more. We think that this particular narrative is very important. Why is this so? We think that humans in general oftentimes are very risk averse, that we think that we have a lot to lose, which means that we never get out of a particular comfort zone and never have the access to a higher level of happiness as a whole. Under their side, people are generally just think that this is it for them, but we think that there should be more than that. Utility also, when it comes to the pursuit of happiness, we think there's a utility in it. Let's say if you attempt to find a job that makes you feel meaningful. Maybe oftentimes these certain jobs probably don't pay as much, for example. But even if you fail along, like maybe you have to, I don't know, sit with your parents for the time being, even if you fail, we think that you still learn from it. That failure in a sense teaches you to probably not do this thing. That maybe you can attempt to find another way in order for you to solve that. But also, we think that happiness shouldn't be determined by the outcome. It should also be determined by the journey. So that you can say that you have lived your life, that you have no particular regrets as a whole. That it is usually oftentimes that you don't want to live your whole life thinking that that was it. You kind of want to do the things that makes you happy in order for you to die happily. We think oftentimes it means that people are also less likely to push dreams onto others, or to people to also do these things that they think is meaningful. So things like parents, for example, pushing certain dreams onto children. Before that, yes, Wazir.
Meaningless jobs are most likely to be like blue-collar workers. So if you think corporations will just, why won't corporations just automate them instead of that, like hiring these people?
Okay, so when it comes to this whole idea of automation, we think that sure, maybe certain jobs will get replaced, for example. But then the ability for them to also find meaningfulness in other jobs as well is very important, which leads me to my second argument. When it comes to the idea of why is it meaningful for others, we think that this is another narrative that is also very important. Because humans in general are social animals, right? We live in communities, which means that our lives are oftentimes influenced by others. Communities thrive and improve when you care about others and aspire to impact others positively as possible. I think that the majority of this deals with this ability of like them thinking that all 8 to 5 jobs suck pretty much, right? We think that it's also very much important for you to be things such as like altruistic. That this aspiration to be altruistic exists under our side. When people think that you have to find meaningfulness is derived from impacting people as positive as possible, even in circumstances where you give a lot of yourself. Jobs, for example, jobs like doctors, for example, where you go through 6 years of medical school, you go through housemanship, you basically are on your feet the whole day and night in order for you to help people. We think there's a lot of utility in that. But it also could mean that you can also be content in the small jobs that you wanted to talk about. Because it means that there's a likelihood for you to believe that also your job can still be meaningful in the scale of it all. Even if, let's say, you're a janitor, for example, it is still meaningful because without you, the whole system in itself cannot run properly. If you're a small clerk, for example, your ability for you to file all the data properly is still very much important for the whole system. It is important for people, I think that this particular narrative is very important for people, especially those who cannot access all these particular other things as much, right? We think that we're the ones who solve the concept of happiness as a whole for people who particularly can't probably even let go of their particular jobs. If they want to be content in this, then we think it's fine. This responds to the whole perception that they say that, oh, apparently everybody thinks that you have to be like a a person who works in Wall Street in order to gain some form of happiness. But we think, if you notice, a lot of their happiness only is derived from this measure of success. But we don't think that everybody has to be successful. We think that people can still derive happiness from just being content and thinking that their lives have impacted those around them positively. That would be prouder to oppose.
I thank the Leader of Opposition for his speech. May I now invite the Deputy Prime Minister to begin the debate.
Test. The first time I came to MDO, I did not break. In the silent round, I wasn't even in the bubble room, I was in the big room. Debate was unfulfilling to me, and I did not find any meaning in it. But what I chose to do was to stay in my path and try my best. And here I am, lucky enough to be giving a speech on this podium. Inside government's world, I will have picked it because I don't think it's meaningful whatsoever, and in the end, I will just leave. Before I go on to address the speaker before me, I think I just need to make one quick clarification. SIDE government does not want us to abandon the jobs. I don't understand the response coming from Silla insinuating that we want people to do that. We want people to stay in their jobs and try harder and try to expand their career progression. Okay, let's make that clarification here so that this won't happen anymore. I think the problem with the government is that they assume that people will be happy with their jobs with this narrative. So if I'm in an unfulfilling job, they assume that this narrative makes them think that their job is fulfilling. I don't think this is necessarily true, and I think we need to debunk this idea. Silla's argument was to suggest that people would find more meaning in their jobs, to take more risks, life is short, etc. I think the problem with this is that it assumes that this narrative gives people meaning in their jobs. What is more likely to happen under your side is that they won't find meaning in their jobs anyway. So what does this look like? And let's just make things very clear. If I am a janitor, I could feel some fulfillment cleaning up floors or whatever and getting a job well done. With this narrative in mind, they won't be happy anymore in their world. The reason why is because they'll always compare themselves towards other things and other people and feel as if that my job isn't meaningful anymore. This means that all these small jobs and all these individuals will be more unhappy under your side. Because in this instance, they aren't fulfilled anymore because under your side you tell them that they need to be happy. So it's like telling someone who's happy, you need to be happy, because happy is such a vague word. They won't feel happy because they could feel happier under your world. So I think that's the generic basic idea coming from our side. So the one issue today, why are people more unhappy in opposition's world? This is very important, and I don't think Silla actually attempted to respond towards Ben's argumentation in this instance. What we said is that meaningfulness is hard to define, but with this narrative, it's harder for people to define it for themselves. What does this mean? I think, so we talked about pop culture and comparing yourself towards other people, but I think it goes further than that. A lot of jobs are really hard. Being a lawyer is really hard, right? But when we watch Suits, we watch Harvey Specter walking in and winning cases, but we don't watch him going through law school, going through starting as a junior partner, making his way up to a named partner. What this argument is to suggest is to say that your standards of meaningfulness is already skewed because what we see and what we are exposed to is only the good things about why my job is meaningful, but people always exclude the hardships that people face. This means inside opposition's world, they will take and look at this skewed perception of what it means to have a meaningful job, realize that I have hardships. I am not being able to achieve the happiness that other people get, the other happiness that other people that I can see, right? This means they're more likely to leave their job or worse, you become unhappy, right? So I think the comparative here is that jobs will be hard. Jobs do have their hardships. The comparative is at least on the outside, people can find meaning in it. In opposition's world, you always have to think, what is the next thing I can do to make myself more happy? Because I'm just not as fulfilled as other people. The second thing that we brought up to you is that it helps out your job's prospects. The reason why this argument is important is because a lot of millennials in the current society, in status quo, always have this perception that I need to have something that's more meaningful. I think Ben gave you good reasons as to why this is bad. The first reason is that you miss out on job opportunities. A lot of times fresh graduates are headhunted simply because they are young and they have so much potential. In the opposition's world, they're not going to accept their job at a young age. They're not going to be the fresh graduates because they want to choose the most meaningful job, right? This means that you'll have shittier jobs when they finally accept something, or if they accept something. The next thing I like to argue is that, so this is based on us already establishing that the definition of what meaning is already very hard, and you always try to attain the next best thing. This means that under your side, when you get that good job, you would feel unhappy. You would feel like I could be something else and I could be something more fulfilling. This means you're more likely to leave that job, try to find other career prospects and things like that. The reason why this is bad is because firstly, it affects your CV. So that means that obviously, if you work in so many different places, new employers will be like, wow, this guy must have either been fired, or he has no commitment, or he has no loyalty to my firm. This means in your world, like, people are just generally harmed because of the fact that they can't get good career progression. Another thing that is important to know is that starting off fresh and accepting a job and going through the hardships means that you're able to progress in that job, right? So maybe you start as a clerk and that may be unfulfilling, but you progressing and the fight of trying to stay in that job, but constantly doing better and getting that promotion is the fulfillment that we can get under our side. Look, I think the better part of this argument is to also suggest that that means you're just more economically stable, which means that you can access other forms of meaningful life things. And what I mean by this is that maybe we might not get our fulfillment from our jobs, but the money that we accumulate means that we can start a family, means that we can engage in consumerism, which gives my life meaning in general. This means that happiness can still be attained under our side and just through different mechanisms. Yes.
So your jobs, when they are a necessity, it allows corporations to say that these people should just stay in their jobs, be exploited, and face worse harms just because they just stay content in your world.
No. So I think this job corporation thing does not make sense simply because in your world, what your corporations and what these things are going to do is to tell you that no, your job is fulfilling, you should be happy with it. So I don't think that this is necessarily a big part of the debate. I don't think it really explains well in the end. So what is the conclusion coming from the government team? The first thing that we like to establish, and we already have established, is that the definition of what meaningful is already still underside opposition's world. They cannot assume that you telling people that you should have a meaningful job makes people happy with their job. They're more likely to become unhappy. The second thing is that it's harder for you to access other forms of happiness simply because you job hop around and you don't have the economic capacity to access other forms of material happiness. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition is UITM, MARA. They paid for this tournament. MARA paid for their tournament. We are 3 idiots who paid so much money for this tournament. So just give us the win. Thank you.
Prime Minister for his speech, and now invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to communicate here.
Honorable panel, debating a final doesn't just mean that you should just be as fluent, sound nice, and as simple flow as you can be. It also means that you need to respond to your team, respond to their position, whatever arguments they make, whatever clarifications they make, towards a lack of response or the lack of clarification that they have made themselves. Silla has given you multiple argumentations upon which many were unresponded to. What are those things? First, Realize that side government has failed to give out what is meaning in the first place. What does meaningful look like and how does it get meaningful? The best thing they ever did was say that meaning is derived by pop culture. We think that meaning can be derived by yourself. That meaning can be having some meaning to yourself or finding that meaning through finding some meaning towards those who you care. Therefore, if I care for my country and I think that the job I do is good enough to help society, then that has some meaning towards me. If I'm a janitor, then I think that my job of cleaning these schools means kids get a better learning experience. That could be meaningful for me. And we agree that not all jobs are meaningful. That some jobs can be brain dead, that some jobs leave you unfulfilled. But we need to realize the comparative then. That within those jobs where they say it's a necessity and you need to be there and you suck it up, that's a much worse job. That's a job where they can always tell you, don't job hop because on their world, they'll be put with that much fear and that much attack. And they'll say, if you job hop, you will be a failure, you will never succeed. On our world, when we normalize the idealist narrative, job hopping is something that's common, therefore it has less harm. Job hopping is only bad if the comparative is that most society is loyal. And when that's not true, job hopping is just something normal. And it means that corporations must make your job as meaningful as possible. They must explain that your work in company X allows us to help children in Africa, for example. This is something that's important. Why is it actually so? Because when you do those brain dead kind of jobs, you're doing it for no impact, you're doing it for pure contentment. It also means that you're not okay with doing whatever harm to society. You're not okay with doing anything or something that harms everyone else just because it's in job still. On our side of the house, when you realize that there is meaning to what you do, and you realize that your job destroys that meaning for other people, because now you harm the lives of others, that's an incentive for you to call out your jobs, to want to make your jobs better for everyone else. What other things will bring along to you here? I'll speak to you two argumentation. Firstly, I'll explain why exactly we are able to create jobs and dreamers and innovate in society, and secondly, why the eventual failure will exist. Thanks. Okay, so moving on to my responses, few ones quickly. So I think it's important for us to realize what this debate will look like then. Because this debate is not necessarily about being stuck in jobs. Because life is essentially based upon a few single actions that you make, a few single decisions, that one or two moments in life. And therefore, this debate should be about that decision that you should take. What job should you enter? What life should you take? Should you leave your job? Should you stay within these jobs that you hate so much? We think that this narrative allows you to change how you think and the perception and the thought process when you are taking these jobs. I think that's what's important within this debate. And also realize that just because social media or pop culture exists doesn't necessarily mean that it defines who you are and what you think about. What you think could be meaningful towards you could be different from everyone else. And if they wanted to say that me watching movies still harms me because it creates an unfair expectation, then that's good. That means I have a reason to want to learn. I have a reason to want to change. The reason I wanted to become a lawyer was because I thought that that could be meaningful. It was because I thought that I wanted to do that. And without that narrative, I have no reason to work hard. I'm fine with being competent. I'm fine with doing whatever it takes. Just take the money and do nothing within life. We think that's a worse life to live. That's a worse society to live in. Sure.
The narrative is meaningfulness in your own jobs. Why will corporations all of a sudden take on the extra burden to make jobs meaningful for other people?
Because if it's not, they leave. That's what we told you early on. Because if it's not, they job hop. Because when everyone believes that their jobs should be meaningful, job hopping becomes much more common. That's why inside the school, the ones who job hop the most are millennials who believe in this narrative the most. That's why it's been more common for people to job hop within this society right now. So move on to my argumentation. What's exceptionally important about this narrative? Because it allows us to create some form of dreamers. It allows us to create some form of innovation. This is again something that Silla has already told you, but they have not responded to. So the moment you have these kinds of jobs, it gives you an ability for you to focus on what meaningful progress you can make for others. What jobs and what can you do that has that meaning? And for most people, that meaning means either a greater legacy or leaving some value of history. They think that they should leave some sort of reputation for themselves. So this means the ability for them to want to change the world, the ability for them to want to progress society. This inspires them to want to do that work. We believe that in a world where Mahatma Gandhi did not believe that he wanted to make his life meaningful by changing India, we do not have that ability. In a world where there's no narrative for people to want to change their lives, there's no reason for them to want to change their lives, because humans are naturally risk averse. They make a lot of mental decisions, and that mental decisions that exist without this narrative means that they are so unlikely to make any changes, they are unlikely to take any gambles within their lives. Why is this utility important? Because we believe that this utility, that the benefits it helps, the benefit it helps society, means that something that only exists on us in the house, because we're willing to take that gamble and fail. Because we're willing to make that change, and that change lasts more than our lives, it lasts as a legacy. Any benefits we have for society helps everyone. Even if we're dead, any legacies politicians have, scientists have, or researchers have, impacts humanity for the next future decades. Why is that failure that exists on our side? And why is that failure good? We believe that failure is a manual on which you learn something from. That failure can be a stepping stone towards what you learn. That's why for some people, failure is actually what they need. Some people fail school, some people fail universities, some people fail at their jobs, but realize that that's not what they wanted to do. Realize that it failed because they never wanted to be there in the first place, because they never liked having those jobs. Failure can become a stepping stone. For example, people like Jack Ma, who failed to multiple universities and failed multiple business ventures, he used those failures of himself as a stepping stone, one to learn from his mistakes. That every single failure is every single lesson learned. It also means that it's not just for yourself, it's failure for other people. That I can learn from Jack Ma's failure and try not to do those exact same things. That I can change who I am and I can change the world, because I know that there's a blueprint to success. And that blueprint to success is learning from others' failures, is learning from my own failures. Because it means the comparative is saying that I tried, versus their world where you live in constant regret, knowing who you are, thinking I could have done better, I could have done this. You live your life being bitter, you live your life being angry, you live your life never meaning what it's like to actually try.
Thank you,
Yes.
Deputy Leader of Opposition, for speaking, and I invite the government to continue.
Ladies and gentlemen, under both sides of the house, people will try to search meaning in their jobs. But the difference is, on our side of the house, if these people can't, and we think that's fine, it's a necessity, right? So for the janitor that finds meaning in working long hours to be able to feed their kids, good for the person. And we think the person will also exist on our side of the house. But we think this debate is about individuals who can't access those kind of meaningful jobs because simply they don't have a company that their father owns. They simply don't have a company that probably they have some connection with. These people, we say, it's a necessity for them to keep their jobs in the first place. So first thing I will do is just a bit of clarification. So the working conditions under both sides of the house don't change, right? So it means these individuals will still work long hours. They still have a lot of work to do. The difference is just by the difference that you don't make, just by telling them that jobs should be meaningful does not mean that suddenly these people will feel that their jobs are meaningful. What they will feel that, and yet what they will feel on the back side of the house is that it must be meaningful. It's not something wrong with me, or if not, I must quit the job now. The difference in our world is we say it's fine, it's probably not meaningful, but it's probably a necessity, and we must take it up now for us to have better prospects in the future. And we think that's the fundamental difference between both sides of the house. The only thing that they have in their side of the house is basically about corporations. They see that corporations in their world are more likely to give meaningful jobs. But think about that. It's quite weird because simply the CEO who has a lot of reasons why to keep costs low and to keep profits high, suddenly just by telling him, like telling Jeff Bezos, jobs should be meaningful, will suddenly make him have all the incentive to change. What's more likely to happen in your world, they will push for more automation. They will push to replace humans with machines and therefore render all your skills worthless. Or second, they will just outsource it to China or like to India, to third world countries who probably people in there are there who live in destitute places and therefore will accept the job out of desperation because that's probably the meaning that they can find. So we think that corporations under both sides of the house are less likely to change. I don't think this debate is about that, and I think that's not that won't win them the debate. So let's talk about meaning in jobs, right? They say that in their world, people tend to find meaning by themselves pop culture is not necessarily that everyone consumes. But first, let's understand this is only a mitigation. So if it's true, maybe all people don't consume pop culture, but if some people do, that is a harm that you need to defend on the side of the house. And we argue, most often than not, people do consume pop culture, right? Because millennials have no working experience, they have no idea to conceptualize what working conditions really are, or what it's really like in the first place. So what do they turn to? They turn to the most accessible avenue, which is probably Netflix, and probably try to like watching suits about how Hafiz is an alpha male and like doing all these good things and taking to everyone access. So really this is not what the reality is, and we think on that side of the house this will be the prevailing culture, and really that's bad. Second thing is we say meaning is hard to be defined in the first place, and therefore there will always be an endless search under that side of the house. Because people will always doubt their current job. What if there's something better out there? What if there's something that might make it more meaningful compared to the current job that I have now? What is the response to this? They say, oh, if I find a meaningful job, therefore I will be more likely to work hard. No. In your work, people want the meaning. People want to find the meaning now. So therefore, even a slight discontent in the way of how the working conditions are, they are more likely to just quit and to just give it up on that side of the house. And we think that's not what people should do, right? We think in your work, the idea that people should always try to find jobs that meets the all perfect and all the high standards that we have on the side of the house is a damaging one. And we think people will just are more likely to quit. They won't even try to put the work in. In our world, we say put the work in first. It's fine, right? Put the work in first. Then maybe after you climb up the social ladder, you become a manager, then things will eventually have some meaning, and that's the comparison. We think in our world, people want immediate satisfaction, which is not something that is realistic on that side of the house. Let's talk about job hopping culture, right? They say that job hopping culture is good because everyone does it. Therefore, like at the end of the day, it's fine. We think no, like for the same reason that I said, that in our world, people will just push, like CEOs will just push for more automation, or like to reduce human involvement in manufacturing. This is currently that already happened. The AI, the uprising of AI to replace lawyers, and a lot of jobs already happening. This will happen even more in your world, because for these people to have meaning, probably they will ask for higher pay, they will ask for a lot of job benefits that simply CEOs have no incentive to give in the first place. Therefore, that's why you will push for more automation, and people will be jobless on that side of the house. Second, we say that the job hopping culture, or the idea of you must find meaning, makes people delay to enter the working phase of life. And the reason why that is bad, because the later you wait, the worse your jobs prospect will be. Because for example, in India, 12 million new graduates graduate every year and join the working force. So if you wait 1 year, you risk to compete with another 12 million people. And in their world, people are more likely to delay like 1 or 2 or 3, even 3 years, or even 4 years, right? Because simply they simply cannot find what is the meaning, or like what is the about how they want to be, or what jobs like they want on that side of the house. So we think that delaying these kind of job prospects makes it even worse, because at the end of the day, under that side of the house, they still have to accept jobs. But the job that they accept will be maybe even worse because these people have no working experience, they delay too much. So at the end, even if in our work they accept meaningless jobs now, but it's fine, they get higher pay. In their work, they can't even ask for higher pay because these people are old. So I take mine.
Why is it especially harmful if I work hard and I like the fact that I'm trying to exceed my dreams? At the very least, the comparative is I'm happy and I'm trying to work on it. Why is it hard if I take my time to try to achieve my dreams, to find a better life? At the very least, I'm working hard on it. I'm happy that I'm trying to do it.
Yeah. I think if people want to work hard or people want to find meaning, it's fine. They can do that on the outside of the house. What we say is sometimes whatever the work that you put in might not bring meaning for you. And that's also fine, because the meaning might not come necessarily now, but might come later, or might come in other forms. And really other forms can be, for example, money, or like probably better job prospects in the future, and that is fine. So the reality is the world is harsh. We need to work to survive. That's why we're all, like everyone here, probably trying to increase the debate CV and make it like more appealing to the LinkedIn. But the thing is, we think that the idea that jobs always have to be meaningful is a damaging one. Because people picky, but people don't realize that sacrifices are needed in this life. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm 23 and I'm going to graduate soon. And during the process where I have to decide what jobs I'm likely going to want to get in the future, I'm left wondering, what does that job really mean for me? And I'm glad I have a group of friends that tells me that you should find something that finds meaning, that burns the very essence of your soul, whereby that job is supposed to make you happy. That, friends, comes as a result of a narrative that conditions society that helps support these very people who are making that very important decisions in their lives. And we think that that specific narrative is very helpful in terms of dealing with the risk of whether or not you will be successful in the future, whether or not you will be truly happy with the decision that you are likely going to make in the future. So therefore, I have 3 questions in this speech. First, how does this narrative specifically improve the decision making of individuals who are wanting to get a job? Second, why the comparison? A narrative of necessity specifically harms the people on the ground. And thirdly, why we think that the narrative aspires people to achieve greatness and why that leads to more innovation. Rebuttals will be integrated. Let's go on to the first question about how that narrative makes it easier for people to make decisions. Because I think that government was unresponsive to the material that came from Azim and Silla when they told you that people are often risk averse. They are forced to make a decision about whether or not they want financial stability or whether or not they're supposed to find meaning and happiness in the jobs that they're likely going to get in the future. We make that easier for people because the narrative basically says that you should prioritize yourself. You should prioritize the effort, the ability for you to be happy with whatever decisions you are making in the future. So that means that people are more likely going to, compare the meanings that they have inside of them and rationalize that and ensure that when they make that decision, they are likely going to access as much of an information as possible for them to make that rational decision. They don't have that in their world because their mind will be stuck into thinking that I need to get that job because it's a necessity. I need to get that job for me to achieve financial stability. We think that people are less likely going to explore other options and therefore the harms that we want to talk about applies. People are stuck into staying into a job that allows them to be exploited by corporations, that allows them to not be paid adequately because given the fact that corporations in both worlds have a symmetry of information, the moment the narrative of necessity applies, corporations have more control over that, then these people are less likely going to be happy. But second, like they say that people want to create meaning now, and therefore if they don't achieve the meaning now, they are more likely going to give up. Like the process of finding meaning and the craving of that happiness and success once you achieve that meaning is going to make people persevere. The same arguments that Azim and Silla talked about. When they say that, they are likely going to quit. They're not going to quit. They are going to persevere because they know that they are putting themselves into this meaning. They are likely going to want to strive in order for them to crave the happiness that comes as a result of being successful because they know that this job is their meaning in life. They are more likely going to develop their skills in order for them to achieve that happiness quicker, or they are more likely going to, make decisions like job hopping so that they will be able to get happiness and meaning in their life a lot sooner. These are the decisions that we allow people to make because the society is conditioning them to say that, no, you shouldn't just care about money or your friends, you should also care about yourself, about what that job brings to you. We think that people then are more likely going to work hard and persevere. This then directly deals with your heart because in our world, the comparison is that people are more likely going to stay in their jobs and persevere. And therefore, if a person decides that being a lawyer is meaningful to them, and apparently they say that suits is likely going to make them think that lawyering is all that glory without the hard work, people are likely going to now work hard because they know that if they work hard, they can be just like that. That's the comparative. That's why people are more likely going to stay in a job that brings them the most meaning and happiness. Yes.
So in a world where automation is on the rise, the job market is saturated, how likely is it that a millennial with no prior working experience will be able to take the time to choose whatever job is most fulfilling for them and commit to it?
Because if that job that brings meaning to them requires them to learn and apply new skills, they will do that because they know that if they work and apply those skills and when they get that job, they're going to be happy. People are more likely going to make the sacrifices necessary to get those jobs. the comparison in your world is that even if automation were to exist, people are likely just going to stay with the low-end jobs you talk about because they are just going to be okay with staying with those low-end jobs because they say that jobs are just a necessity. At least we acknowledge that these things can happen and people can aspire and apply skills necessary for them to improve and get the happiness and the meaning that they deserve. Second, why exactly the narrative of necessity is harmful? Because I don't think that opposition acknowledges the asymmetry of information that corporations have because they can control your career progression, they can control your wages, and in this case you're likely going to apply in these jobs. Why is this specifically bad in their work? Firstly, people are less likely going to question their value to their company because companies, given they have control over the information and given the narrative now is necessity, they don't stay and wonder, what am I doing with my life? Why am I here? Why am I working 9 to 5? And therefore we think that world allows corporations to exploit these people more by forcing them to save because they can play the card and guilt trip them into saying, if you leave, you will never get a job that is better than this. If you leave, you will never get an income as high as this because they can play that card. That is a harm that they need to defend. But second, in our world, is that people are more likely going to question the conditions that they are in when they are working for these exploitative companies because they tell themselves that what is the meaning that I am likely going to derive working here. The comparative is that people either leave to get a better job that gives them meaning or try to improve the working conditions that in these companies, and therefore the trickle-down effects would mean that people are more likely to be able to find meaning or corporations are incentivized to give jobs that bring meaning to people. Lastly, why exactly that our narrative helps people? Because we think that the stepping stone argument and the guide to success went unresponded to by government. When we told you that people who aspire to dream big and fail will leave a guideline for other people to not make the same mistakes and probably be successful in the future. But also it creates an environment in society whereby they are more supportive towards the people who want to dream big or the people who want to succeed. The comparative is that people are more likely going to want to aspire for something bigger and society is likely going to support them by giving them loans and do whatever is necessary for them to succeed. That's the comparison. Proud to oppose.
Thank the opposition bid for his speech. Conclude for the band announced by opposition flag.
Testing. What is necessity? Necessity essentially means that you think that it's good enough, that you have no reason to want to do better because it's a necessity, that we do this job because it brings in the money. While side government wants to explain to you that necessity means you work hard enough, you'll change your life, you'll become a manager, you'll succeed. But note that they never explain why you want to do these things in the first place. What are the external factors that causes you to make that decision? What was the main reason behind the thought process within your minds? They don't explain why we want to move forward, why we're willing to sacrifice for something, especially because we see it as necessity, especially because we're just content with being there. What we show you is that this narrative means that even in dead-end jobs, it gives me a reason to want to change my life. It gives me a reason to want to make sure that this job has some meaning. It gives me that reason to find a meaning to what I'm doing. That means the ability for you to make an impact or find happiness out of something that happens. That is what we have. And we think that this necessity only accumulates regret because they've been absolutely responsive to our issue of regret. That the more you work and the more you move up and think that is necessity, that's a regret because you start to think, I could have changed this job when I was a kid. I could have changed and got out and started doing music and started becoming a DJ when I was younger, and it would be much, much easier. And it gnaws at you every single moment, and it attacks how you think and how you live your life. And we think that's a horrible harm that they refuse to engage upon. What else do they tell you? They tell you that when jobs are necessity, people will stay in their jobs and their jobs are good. They say that, and we told you that it's only bad, and job hopping is only bad if job hopping is not normalized. In a world where this narrative exists, people are more likely to keep moving jobs as long as they don't find meaning within these jobs. Therefore, corporations must find a way to cater and find people and keep them within these jobs, therefore making their job have meaning. What is your response? A sudden automation. If automation exists, then both jobs are screwed. No one has jobs in both worlds. But we think that even if it does exist, it does show an ability for people to question the corporations. Why was I there in the first place? Because they don't explain why you want to do more, even if you are in a dead-end job. And we think that means the ability for people to want to change the world with something that doesn't exist in their world. Why can we change the world? This is something that the entire bench just refuses to engage. And we think this is something that's truly important. That this narrative means you want to make a change. You want to have some value, some meaning towards your jobs. It doesn't necessarily have to be some personal meaning as to I enjoy money. It can also be the grandiose dreams that they wanted to argue. And even if we accept their argumentation that jobs or meaning comes from pop culture, it comes from grandiose ideas. Grandiose ideas are what changes the world. Grandiose ideas are what creates innovation. Grandiose ideas are what creates new leaders and new diplomats. I think that this narrative is important because those leaders who believe in the dream that they have will likely want a reason to want to help others achieve their dream because they realize that if people have the dream, they do and work better. And they realize that if people do this, they can succeed and succeed with them. And we told you that any necessary failure that comes is good. That failure is a necessary part of life for you to learn and change yourself. That it can be a stepping stone for yourself and a stepping stone for others. That these things are important. But it's sad that they were willing to, and they were not willing to respond to this because we told you that this impact is important. That it means the ability for you to help others beyond yourself. That it means the ability for you to become altruistic. The ability for you to create generational change. The ability for you to help people long after you die through your legacy. The ability for you to create change because you found that change to be meaningful. Because you want that meaningful job to change the world. And I think it's only on our world where you have that. Because everything else is contentment. And contentment means no progress.
I thank the opposition team to conclude the debate. May I now invite the government reply.
So here's what I'm going to do in my reply speech. I'll tell you why the narrative that you should find meaning in your own job, whether or not it will help individuals to find more fulfillment, and second, whether or not the job hopping culture is a bad thing, whether or not they get to normalize it. But before I start my reply speech, I just like to say, like, the PA system is not very good. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but there's a lot of echoing where I was sitting. It's just extremely uncomfortable for me because I couldn't hear myself, or I couldn't hear other speakers. Yeah. You have to be pretty discontented. Okay, first clarification. They say that we don't respond to a lot of the arguments on their side. But the thing is that we concede that meaningfulness in job is good, right? And the problem is that some people can't find that meaningfulness in their own jobs. So the debate is about the narrative on telling everyone that their job should be meaningful, including those that can't find meaning in their job. And I think that those are the more important stakeholders there. And I'll prove to you in my issue why you hurt them more with the existence of that narrative. So firstly, will the narrative for your own job should be meaningful, help individuals to find more fulfillment? Two things that they say. The first thing that they say is that the narrative will help you actualize what meaning should be. That a janitor would work hard to help the kids to learn better. So that's what they say. But the problem is that this is largely dependent on them being able to define meaningfulness. I think we've proven in my speech already that meaningfulness is quite difficult to quantify or to visualize what it should be. And the rebuttal is that we didn't mechanize this argument. That's not true. We give you many reasons why people are unable to define meaningfulness. For example, a lot of these people are new graduates and have not worked before. So it's difficult for them to conceptualize what a job working condition should be, and they often base it on pop culture, for example. But second, they don't tell me why that pop culture isn't the dominant form of narrative that exists today, right? It exists in media, it exists in every part of your television, and if that is true, it often exaggerates and sensationalizes what a meaningful job should be. But thirdly, we also say if pop culture isn't dominant, you often compare yourself with the best of your colleagues within your workplace, the more privileged individuals in your workplace. We give you so many reasons why that meaningfulness in jobs will be exaggerated and unrealistic, so we don't think you can actualize meaning for yourself. Second, they say that the narrative would incentivize people to work hard to find that meaning, that they will probably persevere in the long term and to innovate in the future. Why we don't think that is true? We think that the narrative that your job should be meaningful actually means that your job should be meaningful throughout your lifetime, that your job should be meaningful even now. So the argument that people will work hard to find meaning is irrelevant, because the narrative that your own job should be meaningful promises meaning now. It promises that you will derive some form of fulfillment now. So you are unlikely to want to persevere or work hard or go through the phases of all the stressfulness in job, because the narrative promises meaning now. So a lot of that argumentation is quite irrelevant. But the thing is, they aren't going to be finding meaning. They say they will eventually find meaning. So even if that narrative is true, we don't think that they will actually ascertain true happiness. The reason why this is true is because happiness often upscales, and you are unable to find the true amount of happiness because the benchmark is placed so high. Therefore, you focus on the discontents in your job. You focus on the things that are stressful in your job. Because the benchmark, because the idea of what it is to be meaningful constantly upscales to the above, you are unable to truly ever feel content and happiness. The last thing is about job hopping and culture. They say suddenly that people will take out loans to fund their dreams. But the problem is, if your search is endless, taking up loans is quite a bad thing. You spend a long time not paying your loans back because you can't find growth and promotion in your job because due to job hopping culture. But they also say to support this is that they will normalize the culture of job hopping. First of all, why would Jeff Bezos change his mind and suddenly normalize the culture of job hopping? We see that they'll probably hire someone else that's more committed, or they use automation. But the important part is, even if you delay yourself to find a good job, what Whip told you is that delaying often creates desperation. And once you're desperate, you just pick up any job, and that job might be the job that is even more unmeaningful than it would ever will be. The job market is limited, therefore you should be like, your job, the first job that you get should be the most necessity of your job, blah blah blah. Thank you very much.
Guys, I think we're done.
Alright, so thank you so much for a wonderful debate session from our finalists. So right now we will give some time for the adjudicators to make their judgment and also to decide who will be the winner of our finals today. So right now, Jackson, come. So right now, Jackson, since we have, I think while we are waiting for our adjudicators to